This is EWA Radio, the official podcast of the Education Writers Association, and I'm public editor Emily Richmond. Like many parts of the country, Colorado is facing a shortage of workers in high-need areas. Stephanie Daniel of KUNC Northern Colorado Public Radio has been reporting on the state's aggressive campaign to find long-term solutions. She joins us now. Stephanie, welcome to EWA Radio.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're delighted to have you. You reported that as early as next year, nearly 75% of Colorado employers are going to require some type of advanced degree. How prepared is Colorado's workforce right now to meet that need?
Colorado is not very prepared. About 57% of adults right now have some type of certificate, 2-year or 4-year degree.
Tell us a little bit about the state's master plan.
It's basically tweaking a master plan and revising a master plan that came out in 2012. This master plan, which came out in 2017, has 4 goals. One is to increase credential completion, erase equity gaps, improve student success, and invest in affordability and innovation. And the reason why, as you mentioned before, jobs are changing. So the overall goal is for 66% of Colorado adults to have a certificate, 2-year or 4-year degree by 2025.
Well, there's an interesting dichotomy here, and one is that Colorado is one of the most educated states in the country, but as you mentioned, they're not really prepared for these workforce challenges, and you have these equity gaps. What's going on?
So this is something that states around the country are grappling with. As you said, Colorado is one of the most educated states, but it's about 60% for white residents, and then it drops down to almost 30% for Hispanic residents. And the reason why this is an issue is Hispanics are the largest and fastest growing ethnic group in the state. And actually, pretty soon, 1/3 of all residents under the age of 18 are going to be Hispanic. So if the state isn't investing in helping this group become prepared through higher education for these jobs, then we're not going to be able to fill these jobs.
There was a statistic in your story that really jumped out at me, and I think it might surprise some of our listeners who may not have read your really excellent package. And that's that this Hispanic population is the fastest growing, but it's not necessarily people who are new to the state. Rather, it's these second and third generation children. Tell us a little more about that.
So Hispanics moved to the state in the 90s for this construction boom, and then they just kind of stayed. And on a whole, Hispanics, women tend to have children when they're younger and tend to have more children. So this has led to a growing Hispanic population.
You wanted to go bigger than just sort of your backyard, if you will, where you typically report, and that's Northern Colorado. Why was this a project where you needed to go statewide?
This is a statewide goal, and I really wanted to touch upon how this could affect all residents. And I think what's really important about this goal and the reporting that I did is I wanted to touch on certificates, 2-year and 4-year degrees, because this plan isn't just about having people go to 4-year colleges and universities, because that's not for everyone. And you can still find a high-paying job with a 2-year degree or even a certificate. So I just really thought it was important to not only have a broad reach, but also reach diverse communities.
How does Colorado compare to other states when we look at things like education funding?
Colorado ranks near the bottom quarter of states for K through 12 per pupil funding. And over the past decade, the state funding for higher education has decreased by almost 10%, and students pay over $4,000 more to go to public colleges and universities. So with this project, I really wanted to tap into programs and groups that were helping to bridge this gap and really providing the resources to help students achieve their higher education goals.
So really, it's not just about making sure they get these degrees, but trying to help them get degrees in state and then stay in state to work, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And really helping them find the right degree for them. Because as I mentioned earlier, a four-year college degree isn't for everyone, and it's not necessarily necessary for the job that you want. And you also have to weigh the factors, the cost. A four-year degree is going to be more expensive than a certificate. So I really wanted to have a comprehensive project that just tapped into all these different avenues that people can take towards finding a good paying job.
Well, that's a great segue into one of the chapters of the project, and that's looking at the role of guidance counselors. The state has a shortage, like a lot of places. What are they doing in Jefferson County?
Jefferson County got this grant from the state, the Counselor Corps grant, and it just pays for counselors to go into schools for 3 years. It's actually a four-year program. The first year assesses the needs of the schools and what the school needs this counselor for. And then the next 3 years, the counselors are placed there in the hopes that the school will then hire the counselor on afterwards. And there's also a cohort, and they meet, I believe it's every other Monday, to just share resources and talk about things that they're doing, to really help them utilize the resources that are there so that they can better serve the students.
Well, I mean, some of this sounds kind of obvious, having a one-on-one opportunity to talk to someone who says to you, okay, well, what are your interests? Let's try to match that up with what your career options might be. But a lot of students simply aren't even getting that time, are they?
Part of this issue is that a lot of schools don't have these guidance counselors, or they don't have enough for that one-on-one support and just kind of talking through all of the options. One of the counselors that I highlighted in my story, Dina Clancer, she sits down with the students and she has them go through a career assessment to figure out exactly what they want to do and what their interests are. And that way she can better guide them into, okay, you're interested in working with your hands. So maybe a better fit for you would be going to trade school as opposed to going to a four-year university.
There's another program that's catching on and expanding in Colorado, and that's P-TECH. Explain that for us.
It's a partnership between a school district, IBM, and a local community college. And actually, IBM created it, and the first school was in Brooklyn in 2008, I believe. The three entities work together, and the school district that it's partnered with is St. Vrain Valley, which is a city along the Front Range here in northern Colorado. And basically, students in the ninth grade, they start taking college classes along with their regular high school classes. And the idea is that in 4 years, or they can take up to 6 years, they will also have an associate degree. And what they decided here was that that associate degree would be in computer information systems. And basically, what it's doing is preparing these students that when they leave high school, they'll be ready to go right into the workforce. And one of the reasons for this program is to help underserved communities that aren't generally represented in technology.
Well, it's interesting because the 4-point plan that you mentioned at the top of the show, it's actually the Colorado Department of Higher Education that has set this ambitious goal to bump up the number of people with degrees and certificates. But clearly, there has to be a lot of buy-in from the K-12 system. Do you feel like Colorado is sort of rethinking the P16 pipeline, if you will?
I did hear about that actually a couple of times in my reporting. And I think there are a lot more programs in schools that are sort of doing this model and getting students to take concurrent enrollment classes where they're taking college classes while they're in high school. And as well as having these partnerships with community colleges or with corporations to have internship programs. So I definitely think that this is a focus for K through 12.
We're talking with KUNC's Stephanie Daniel about her deep dive into Colorado's efforts to boost the number of adults with post-secondary degrees and credentials. Her 5-part series was supported in part by an EWA reporting fellowship. Don't miss an episode of EWA Radio. You never have to. You can find us on your favorite podcast app. And if there's a story you want to know more about, drop us a line. We're at radio@ewa.org. Stephanie, foster students don't get a lot of attention in education reporting. Why was that a demographic group you wanted to explore for this project?
I just thought it was really interesting when I learned about the program and I started looking at the statistics. Nationwide, depending on the state, only 3 to 10% of students from foster care or other independent backgrounds actually graduate from a four-year institution. So one of the students that I talked to, Spencer Hall, he was really open with me about his journey. And he had been in the military. He actually just finished his 8-year commitment. He had been to community college and then transferred to CSU. And he was so happy to be at Colorado State University. It had always been a dream of his to attend a four-year university. And he was also a first-generation student. So he was sort of the embodiment of this whole project.
Well, I think you really tapped into what wraparound services mean for these young people. I mean, it's academic mentors, but also having people around with them to share meals and how to take care of yourself and providing the emotional support that ideally they would have gotten from actual family members.
That's one thing that I kind of saw through my reporting were these cohorts of students working together and learning together and helping each other out. And I think a lot of the students in Fostering Success program are also first generation students. So that presents a whole other set of issues or just things that they have to navigate that they don't necessarily know. And one thing that I thought was really interesting about the Fostering Success program is they have these mentors who are also coming from independent student backgrounds. And while they're helping these students, they're also learning how to access resources themselves. So I think this cohort model and students advocating for themselves to find services really helps them succeed in a college environment.
Something that comes through in your reporting is that it isn't just about the money. It's about human capital. You need guidance counselors. You need trained workers to teach the next generation. Is Colorado ready to make that kind of investment?
I think they are. I think the state is on its way. I think what's nice is that you have the state investing money, like the Council Core Grant Program is a state-funded program. And then you have independent programs. So the Fostering Success program, that's donor funded, and that's at Colorado State University. And then you have a program like PTEC, which is a collaboration between the school district, the community college, as well as a corporation, IBM.
We know that post-secondary certifications can be game changers for workers who are looking to move into the middle class. But in some cases in Colorado, instead of going to community college, the community college is coming to the worker. Talk to us about the mobile learning labs.
So the Mobile Learning Lab is actually out of a community college in the southern part of Colorado. It's part of Pueblo Corporate College. And they just travel all over the state. And so corporations hire them to come and train their workers. And when I went to Owens Corning, which is the company featured in that episode, they talked about how easy it was because the Mobile Learning Lab was literally outside of the plant. It's a roofing plant, and one of the mechanics that was actually part of this program, and it's an apprenticeship program, he was telling me during one of the other classes something broke inside, and he was able to fix it because he was right there. It's another example of companies investing in the workers and wanting to hold on to them and wanting to be a part of their success and make sure that they are able to move through the company because mechanics are hard to find. And they were telling me that as more seasoned mechanics are retiring, they want to bring younger mechanics up through the ranks and help get them trained.
When you talk to students, what do they say is holding them back or what would make a really big difference to their ability to complete their degree?
One thing Spencer Hall said that really stuck with me was students need to advocate for themselves and just learning all the different programs that are out there and asking the questions has been really helpful for him because he actually went through a lot of programs that I featured in my overall project. He's a first generation student, so he was part of this federal grant program called TRIO, which supports first generation students. And of course, he was part of the Fostering Success program. So I think that that's just something that really stuck with me. And I think that that's something that students can teach each other. And that's why the cohort model is so important because students are helping each other and passing that along that you need to advocate for yourself.
We've talked a little bit about what you learned in doing this story. I want to talk about how you did it. There are so many moving parts to a project this size. What did you do to stay organized?
I think the most important thing was just having a plan and an outline. And I think the fact that the Colorado Department of Higher Education, this master plan, had those 4 goals that I mentioned earlier was sort of a natural way to organize my stories. And then also I knew I wanted to touch on certificate programs, 2-year and 4-year degrees. The important thing about this master plan and this goal to get Coloradans educated and have some type of post-secondary degree is that you can do anything. You can do certificate, 2-year, 4-year degree. You just have to do something. So within that framework, I just slotted in my stories. And I really needed to keep in mind also this backdrop that the state isn't doing a great job of funding public education, K through 12 and higher ed. So I sort of kept that in the back of my mind as well as I was working through my stories.
You have a lot of voices in your stories. Some of them are ones we might expect. You have educators, students, and policymakers. Was there anyone you talked to who provided an unexpected or surprising perspective?
So as part of my overall project, I created a standalone podcast, which is each of the 4 radio stories, but there were some voices missing. And one of them was the state demographer. And I talked to her about the migration and population. And I think what she said about Hispanics, fastest growing and largest ethnic group in the state, but also for Colorado residents under the age of 18, 1/3 of those are Hispanic. So it really kind of put into perspective for me why this goal is so important and why this equity gap between attainment levels for white residents and Hispanic residents, which is 60 for white residents and 30 for Hispanic, to close that gap, it's really important.
What about some story ideas for reporters who are covering similar issues on workforce development in their own communities?
One thing I think is interesting would be to look at if there's some type of goal, if the state has a goal or a university has a goal, and figure out what are the issues that could stop that goal from happening. And that's where I started mine. As I said, the state has this goal. They want 66% of all residents to have some type of post-secondary degree. But the state doesn't do a great job of funding education. I think that's a good starting point.
Another thing I would say to look at is to consider some of these outreach programs that might be in your own communities, but also look at some of the research on how many adults are out there right now who have completed at least some college or some credits toward a degree who may not realize how close they are to finishing.
Yes. And I also think it's worthwhile to look at organizations like you mentioned that are filling in the gaps. If maybe the K through 12 system isn't doing their job, then who is helping them? Because there's a lot of organizations out there who are helping to also bring up students and helping to get them graduated and helping to get them on to the next step of their education.
Stephanie Daniel covers education for KUNC Northern Colorado Public Radio, and she's an EWA reporting fellow. Stephanie, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode for us. If there's a story you want to know more about, drop us a line with radio@ewa.org. The mission of the Education Writers Association is to strengthen the community of education journalists and improve the quality of education coverage. For more than 70 years, EWA has helped reporters get the story right. Have a great week, and thank you for listening.